So midterms are right around the corner, and that's got everybody watching the news closely and hoping for the best. This is the first year that some of my peers will be able to vote, so I'm hoping that they're thoughtful and conscious about their voting. I know that I'll be able to vote soon, and I'm going to take that role very serious. I think it's very important for our country. Good evening, listeners. You are listening to Story Delight, a podcast where we discuss Christianity, faith, and the arts. This is a production of LaSalle Catholic College Preparatory. My name is Isaac, and I'm a senior here at LaSalle. On this episode, we will be discussing Hacksaw Ridge, written by Andrew Knight and Robert Schenken. And tonight I have a special guest, my mom. Her name is Chris. She's mostly here just to keep me focused. Well, in all seriousness, she's always got very insightful and thoughtful input, and she'll be helping me discuss the book throughout this podcast.
Hey everybody, glad to be here.
So just a warning to the listeners, this podcast will be full of spoilers for the movie, so if you haven't seen it yet, I would recommend seeing it. It's a phenomenal movie. So now we're going to be talking about Hacksaw Ridge and kind of what it's about and why it was so popular when it was released and what makes it such a important movie. So the main character, his name is Desmond Doss, and he's a Seventh-day Adventist that decides to join the army. The big problem is that he's a conscientious objector, which means he refuses to do harm to anybody. That includes picking up a gun, which will lead to a lot of conflict later on in the story. So he joins even when his parents tell him not to, and when he gets there, he's not greeted too warmly because of his him being a conscientious objector. He has a bunch of issues with his drill sergeants and commanders. They even have a court case, and his dad, who knows people in Washington, D.C., gets him out of the case and allows him to complete basic training and become a medic the way he wants to, even without passing all the training with firearms. So he becomes a medic and gets deployed. This all takes place during World War II in Japan. So he gets sent overseas, and his first mission is they're scaling this massive cliff that's called Hacksaw Ridge. And up top, there are hundreds of Japanese soldiers, thousands of even, waiting. So they climb up there, and it's a bloody, gruesome battle. They're losing hundreds of people on both sides, and Desmond Doss obviously still isn't carrying a weapon. He's the medic, and so his job is to go around and save people that are injured. And it starts out, he's doing what he barely can. Nothing special so far, saving as many people as the other medics. But after the big battle is where you can really start to tell that he's special. Most of the United States Army retreats, climbs back down the wall, goes back to their base. But Desmond stays up there, and he decides to go around and find people that are injured that aren't quite dead yet and save them. And single-handedly, through the night, he rescues one after another, pulling them back to the cliff and lowering them down using a knot that he originally messed up but now has a different use for. So one by one, he goes through, and the movie kind of shows just clips of every person. And I think this movie is based off a real story, and in the end, he saves like 60 or 70 people. So there's one phrase that he keeps saying that's very important to this, I think. This is a lot about his character. So after every person that he lowered down, he said, just one more. And he's asking God to just give him the power to help one more person. So he works through the night and through the next day, and all the sergeants that were telling him he's a wimp and not going to do anything are seeing all these people that are mysteriously showing up without arms or legs, but being worked on by the doctors and that are going to survive. And somebody tells them that Desmond's still up there. So they all go to the bottom of the cliff and meet him, and they start helping take the bodies down. And in the end, he earned the Congressional Medal of Honor and showed more courage than anybody had ever thought that he would or that anybody would. And he used his faith in God and what he believed in to give him the power to do what he believes is right. And I think he did a good job of showing the power that faith can have in someone, no matter what you have faith in, but in this case, specifically God. So now it's time to analyze the movie itself and talk about scenes that I think are important and why they're important. So we're going to be talking about the court case towards the beginning of the movie, about him disobeying orders to carry a gun. Then we're going to talk about a specific line that he says that says a lot about his character, and I think it's very important. One of the most important lines in the movie. And then, obviously, we're going to talk about him saving people and what that really means. And we're going to finish it off with describing the scene from his last trip down and kind of what happens after that, why that's important, and why it's a good conclusion to the movie. So, first, the court case. So, a little background. In order to become a medic, he had to complete all of basic training, which includes weapons training also. But as you know, he refused to pick up a weapon as a conscientious objector. In doing that, he disobeyed orders multiple times from multiple people of authority and not touching a gun. Now, this led to a court case where they were trying him for disobeying orders. So, what's important about this case is that he was in danger, like threatening to go to jail for disobeying people in the army, but he was standing up for what he believes in and really sticking to his beliefs.
He was really mystified, too, at how under attack he was for this. He seemed to have been kind of misled, or he was given one story when he enlisted, which was that it was fine for him to be a conscientious objector, and then it certainly wasn't fine, and he was really surprised at how attacked he was.
There were even cases where he was physically attacked. You know, they were beat at night and bullied, essentially, badly. But even in those cases, he wouldn't get people in trouble. He didn't say anything, and he just kept going and sticking to what he believes in. So, in this scene, there's an essay, or a book that came to mind that I read in this class, by Henry Nouwen. It's called Magic to Faith. And in this chapter, he is describing one's development, the development of their faith, and going from a kid to young adult to a matured adult. And so in the beginning of the story, he was taught that it's not good to kill. That's the biggest sin there is. Basically, the foundation of what a conscientious objector is. Both of his parents talked about that, and that's what he had in his head. Now, as this matches directly with what Nouwen said. This is, and I quote, "Religion in our society is generally a private affair," which in his case was. It was something that just he believed deep down. He said that religion, or these beliefs, were good for Sunday and the pious hour of the week, but do not really relate to all the new things that we've learned about this and other worlds. So this is his beliefs seeming unimportant. But he goes on to develop them stronger and understand that they are important. And this court case where his beliefs are being tested is where you can see the next stage that Nouwen describes. The next stage is young adult. One quote that I'm choosing from this one is, "During the college years, a new important aspect of a mature religious sentiment can develop." Now, obviously, he's not in college, but he's of that age. And his maturity and his mature faith is definitely of that age. He's being tried literally in a court case. And he chose to stick with that faith as he matures, and now he's putting his beliefs into action.
Right. He's not just being afraid of breaking the rules. He's really using his beliefs in his life.
Yeah. So, this scene, the way it ends is his father, who served also, knew somebody in Washington, D.C., very high power, that wrote a letter, and it was given to the judge in this case, and it said that they have no authority to make him carry a weapon.
Right. It defended his right to be a conscientious objector.
He won the case.
Yeah.
And went on to become a medic.
Yeah. He had an interesting relationship with his father.
Yeah, it really did.
It was complicated.
It seemed like a bad relationship, but in the end, like, his dad knew what he was doing was the right thing, and that it was kind of, I could do a whole podcast on that alone, you know?
It's funny how his dad was also a Seventh-day Adventist and obviously cared deeply about nonviolence, and yet he was a really violent man to his family, which was just so strange and so hard to reconcile. But you can see it's so nice in a movie to see a flawed character who has redeeming qualities. He's not one-dimensional. He's not just an abuser, and he's not just a saint. He's like a lot of us.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny that it's almost like Doss has a more mature faith when it comes to being conscientious objector.
Right.
He's against harm in all ways, unlike his father.
Right. It was great that his father did the right thing in that instance. Like, he knew that his son was doing something basically better than he did.
Yeah.
And he knew that he had to support him, and he really went to great lengths to do that. Seemed to be doing it sober for once, too.
Yeah. So, next thing I'm going to talk about is a quote that my mom showed me. She found an amazing quote that poured into this scene. Now that I think about it, yeah, it is hands down one of the most important. So, at the end of the very first battle, they lost hundreds of people, if not thousands of people, and he goes to the edge of the cliff. It was that night after the attack. Doss does, yeah. And he looks over the edge and doesn't see anybody. And he says to himself, "God, I can't hear you."
He said that out loud, even.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
out loud,
He was
just like pleading with God, "I can't hear you." It was that moment, like, I think, like, almost like what Jesus experienced when he said, "Why have you forsaken me?" He felt alone, and he felt without God.
Yeah, and so almost immediately after that, he hears a soldier cry for a medic.
Yeah, call out a wounded soldier. Yeah, and then he said, "Okay."
Yeah, and my mom brought up another thing that related back to the beginning of the movie where he was getting an evaluation by a psychologist for his religious beliefs, and they were asking him if he hears voices and he talks to God as if it's some BS.
Crazy.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy, and that God is that some kind of voice inside your head that has no real element to it.
Yeah, but this scene really shows that God can speak through people, and that sometimes it doesn't just take like prayer. It takes really taking your beliefs into action to figure out, like, you have to act upon your beliefs for God to tell you what to do. You have to give him a sign that you're willing to help, so it seems like is what that's telling me.
And that God, I think that God wants our faith to be action, right?
Yeah.
And God wants, here we are with other people, and that's how we hear God, is through our service to other people, right?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. What I just really like, and what I found so compelling about that scene, is the contrast between what seemed to be pretty common notions of faith, even amongst religious people. I think that people think about faith as a feeling or some kind of righteousness or piety, and what his faith was in that moment was so different than that. It was pure action and pure service and pure selflessness. And didn't it kind of make you think about St. Francis and his selflessness too? How he was described as being, he just really, really left himself.
Yeah, and we're going to obviously touch on St. Francis more. I think he's very similar to the actions of Doss. We'll talk about that in basically the next scene that we're going to be talking about. Anything else you want to say about this quote?
No, just that I loved it.
I did too. So the next one was very obvious. It was the big part of the movie was him saving people.
Yeah.
And so he went on to save numerous people, tens of people.
Yeah, 60 or 70 or 80 or thereabouts.
Yeah, in real life that's about what he saved.
75, yeah.
He worked through the night. The attack ended towards the end of the day.
And he was alone.
Yeah, alone, and well, all he had was the motivation of the people that needed saving and his
Right.
beliefs.
Right.
They motivated him. So after he heard that first cry, and he knew what he was supposed to do, after he heard God basically talking to him, he went on to go through and find every single person that he could. He would go to body looking for any sign of life, giving them morphine and any kind of bandages or tourniquets and aid that they could find, and
dragging them kind of brutally.
Yeah, but
the
drag
only
or
way
carry
that he could,
them
to
as
the
far as he
edge.
could. Yeah, and
Right.
I think it's just funny. I don't know if it means much, but in basic training, they were trying to tie a rope, and he messed it up and tied 2 loops instead of 1. But it's funny because now in the end, that's how he managed to get people down. He put their legs through the loops and use a pulley, like a tree, as a kind of a pulley, and lower people down. And it showed towards the end his hands were bloody and raw from holding the rope. And
he kept going. His hands looked. I mean, I don't know how true it is, but it made me wince, that's for sure, that his hands were bloody, and that was like halfway through his rescue effort, I think.
Yeah. And this is where he was saying that same phrase. What was it? One more God? Just one more God?
One more, please. Let me help. Let me save one more, I think is what he was saying.
And every time he got one more person.
That went on all through the night.
Yeah, and people started to realize that they were people at the bottom. They were taking the people back to the camp, and the next morning, people got there, and they were the general and the people that were in charge were going to the tents where the medics were, and they saw these rows of beds of people that were injured that were being saved and recovering.
Who hadn't been there before.
Yeah. And somebody told them that it was DOS, and people were amazed. So
they were shocked.
But that leads to another part. I think there's a lot more to be said about him saving people.
Yeah.
At one point, the second attack that really caused the first retreat that day had led to some underground tunnels. Right, that the Japanese were hiding in. Right. And at one point, he went in there to hide from some people. From some of the Japanese and he was soldiers. Avoiding people when he looked over his shoulder and saw this Japanese soldier that was wounded, had his shirt off, and had that exact same look of fear and just lost and
a lot of pain,
that he was feeling, and that the people he was saving was feeling. And that's where and what he did was he gave him morphine and a bandage and
fixed him up.
Helped
he treated him exactly the same way that he treated the American soldiers.
And that's even one more bit of evidence of him carrying out his values, because that means everybody. Because when God talks about, and any message, he's not talking to the people you associate with. He's talking about everybody. Right.
God, I don't think God sees countries and races and things like that.
No,
it's humanity.
Yep.
Yeah.
They were all created in His image.
And then there was that part also when he was lowering. They were talking about how he even lowered some Japanese soldiers down, some wounded Japanese soldiers, who then I guess didn't make it, but that's beside the point.
Obviously. Right. This is what really makes me think of St. Francis, and I think there was a clear similarity between Doss and St. Francis. There was a book written by G.K. Chesterton about St. Francis, and I'm talking about when he kind of gave up everything and began to serve God, and they said that he probably fared worse than any ordinary beggar, for the beggar would eat the best he could get, and the saint would eat the worst he could get. This was St. Francis giving himself up entirely to his faith, sacrificing everything.
Being completely selfless.
Yeah, and that's exactly what
he did.
Yeah.
For a long time. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the thought of, I can't even imagine having that kind of selflessness and that kind of faith, because he had, even before that night, just as a conscientious objector, entering into war without a weapon. It's just unimaginable to me. And there were so many times in that movie where I just wanted him to pick up a gun. I wanted him to defend himself, because I would want to defend myself. I can't imagine heading into pretty much the most dangerous situation anybody could head into and not being able to defend yourself. That is like the ultimate in selflessness.
Yeah, it really is. So there's one other quote also from the book that I really like in relation to his selflessness and his actions up on Hacksaw Ridge. The quote is, he never despised his fellow creatures, and therefore he never despised the opinion of his fellow creatures, including the admiration of his fellow creatures. And in this case, they don't mean fellow as in fellow Americans, they mean fellow humans.
Yeah.
And this is really, reminds me of that scene where he helps the Japanese people, the multiple scenes actually.
Yeah.
And he has no reason to hate that, well, him personally.
Yeah.
I guess there would be a reason to, because of the war, and
Yeah.
but his faith and the belief that never despising his fellow creatures was stronger than that.
Right. Yeah.
And there was a whole other belief as well that he stuck to so strongly.
Yeah. It was kind of interesting that he felt so compelled to sign up and be a part of the effort. So, and he felt that it was his duty. He felt some definite duty to serve that way. But when it came down to it, I think that he felt that his duty to his faith and to God was stronger than his duty. Well, obviously it was. That's kind of the whole point, that his duty to God was higher than his duty to his country.
Yeah, I really agree with that. So now we're going to talk about one of the last scenes, the last big scene of him in the war. Was his last trip down. He had 2 more people to save, right, on his last trip?
No, I think...
Yeah,
well, he got one person down,
one
and then it was himself and another.
Yeah, and it's a pretty good action scene. He had him...
Yeah, suspenseful.
Drag a guy on a blanket with a gun. The guy being dragged had a gun, and he was fending him off, and tied him up quickly and threw them off the cliff, just hoping that they would be okay. And
right.
At that point, all the people in the army realized that he was up there the whole night saving people, and they came to meet him at the bottom.
Right. And
they're all down at the bottom, and they see that these 2 people attached to ropes fly down. And
then they see a bunch of Japanese soldiers
at the top trying to shoot him.
At the top, right. And that was just one of those feel-good, exciting scenes, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, and
because
all the people down below supporting him and
came to his defense,
saving him.
Right,
yeah.
Right when he needed it.
Yeah.
Because he would have that would have been the end of him, but yeah.
Yeah. So, I think what's important is kind of people's reaction at the end of that scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Finally once he got back and cleaned up, he was very shooken up clearly, but all these people that were calling him a coward and testifying against him and believing in him,
beating him,
yeah,
and everything, yeah,
were coming up. Oh yeah, there's the case of the guy in the foxhole, mm-hmm. talking about how he misjudged him. It was that big guy that originally took his Bible and beat him, and
it was horrible to him.
Mm-hmm. And then Doss went on to do everything he possibly could to save him. Didn't make it, but they ended well, which is, I think, is good, at least.
Right.
So the drill sergeant or the commander was talking to him and said that he couldn't be more wrong about him. Mm-hmm. And
he also recognized, he asked him to go back up the next day, mm-hmm. And recognized the leadership that he was in possession of as somebody who was so willing to sacrifice himself for other people. And that's kind of an interesting thing that's where it was. I appreciated seeing that that was treated as a leadership quality, as opposed to somebody who can yell louder or carries the bigger gun, right? Yeah. He was lowly. He was nothing at first, and then and then he was their leader. They didn't want to go up without him.
Jesus, the person that was persecuted and hated, became...
right.
You know, it's a very similar... I think that it's funny because usually movies that are this closely related to, like, religion aren't true stories. They're made up and they're meant to prove a point.
Right.
But this is one of those miraculous cases where it was somebody that truly was acting the way Jesus did, and the way saints did, and it was perfect. Yeah. This is a good movie to watch and for a topic like this.
Right, absolutely. Yeah.
So, talking about how he couldn't be more wrong and how they all misjudged him, and this makes me think of the way St. Francis was treated. Mm-hmm. So in the beginning...
Right. They treated him like a fool, right?
Yeah, because he gave everything up, and he was a
nobody understood
peasant.
What he was...
Yeah, nobody understood, just like nobody understood Doss either.
Right. He just seemed crazy or foolish.
Yeah.
Or both.
And one thing that Chesterton wrote was that all that part of his human nature had suffered the heaviest and most crushing blows. It is possible that after his humiliating return from his frustrated military campaign, he was called a coward.
Which is exactly what they called Doss.
Yeah.
Right.
And, the resemblance is just astounding.
It's awfully hard for a man in our society, or in most societies, to refuse to be violent. Or to not be successful at being violent, because men are so expected to be violent, to not just strong, but actually to have that capacity and the willingness for violence. And when a man says no to that, people hate that. That just goes against some really fundamental beliefs about men.
Yeah. So we're going to back up just a little bit to when he was making that last trip down, and all the people were meeting him at the bottom to back him up, save him. And when he got down, he was shook up. They helped him stand up and walked him down to the beach where the Jeep was, and he passed basically a row on each side of people just in awe, and
all the guys he was serving with.
Yeah.
Everybody would come back to help him, right?
Yeah.
To help get him down and to help him out. Yeah. I thought it was a really neat scene because it didn't seem too overdone. Like a lot of big scenes in movies are overdone.
Yeah.
And, but this one, I thought they did a good job, and it seemed like all the guys were looking at him kind of with an interesting combination of awe and surprise and appreciation, and like they were almost confused because they were having to reconcile what they had been thinking of him with what they knew of him now, and who he was and what he had done, and the kind of person he was, really.
Yeah. And I noticed one more thing that I'm sure that some of them were feeling, and that they learned from it, because this is what I was thinking as I watched this scene, is I wish that I had that courage and that faith in something.
Yeah.
And that much power. And I'm sure that those same people were thinking, where did he get that faith?
Yeah.
Envious almost. And that for sure, what's the word I'm looking for? Encouraged,
Yeah.
I'm sure it was encouraging, and I think that even if he didn't save somebody specifically that was there, he taught them a huge lesson that's going to help them.
For sure. It's interesting. I kind of wonder where, how people are formed and where they get that. I mean, above and beyond the obvious answer of just a faith in God. But that story gave us a couple of clues as to, his faith formation. And that first scene in the movie where he hurt his brother, and his parents said to him that he could have killed him, and obviously that had a lot to do with his embracing nonviolence. But then that other where remember when he was telling the guy who was bullying him, and he was telling him about his mother. Yeah, his dad attacking his mother, and how he was really close to shooting his father. He had the gun in his hand, and he almost shot him. And to come that close to not being the person he wants to be.
Mm-hmm.
And at that moment, in that intense moment, to make that decision to be the person he wants to be, that he believes God wants him to be, that's got to cement that somehow in you in a way that it's never going to be cemented in me, maybe.
Yeah.
Not that you can't arrive there by some other means, but those were pretty important moments in his faith formation.
Mm-hmm. Now, just talking about this, I thought of one other thing that's important is in that scene where he was talking to the guy that bullied him, and he said that when he almost shot his father, he said that was the instance where he vowed to never pick up a gun again.
Right, that's right.
And going back to the whole the transformation, the maturing of his faith, where he went from just believing that violence is bad to not picking up a gun. That was one of those times where his faith fully became a truly mature faith.
Yeah.
That was one of those things that moved him to literally never pick up a gun and put his beliefs into action.
Can you imagine the two people who you love most, who love you most in the world, having one of them attack another and then you almost killing one of them? I can't imagine going through something like that. Yeah,
no, it's not something you really want to think about. But none of this movie is something you want to think about.
Oh, really?
And I think that this movie forces you to think about things that you don't want to.
Yeah.
And in doing that, almost, you could argue that matures everybody's faith that watches it,
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think we're going to wrap the analyzation of this movie up. I'd like to say that if you haven't seen this movie yet, even if you didn't think you wanted to, this is one of the best movies I've seen in a long time, and I highly encourage you, even if you're against violence or no matter who you are.
Or if you love violence.
Or if you love violence. It's a very moving, well-made movie. And it made me even want to learn more about Doss and his real life, because since this is based on a true story, he's a hero and as close to a saint as you're going to get in this day and age.
Yeah, very compelling.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay, so that's the end of our analysis. So, with a movie that relates so closely to God and St. Francis and multiple saints, obviously, I think it's important to kind of understand how this movie ties into everyday life. That's for anybody. And we talked about this a little bit already, how he kind of teaches and gives people motivation. So I know that nonviolence is a clear topic in this movie, but it's very clear that that's a metaphor for his strong faith and acting upon his beliefs.
I think that, I did find this movie really compelling, and certainly it made me think a lot about how I live and my faith. But I think that even though I'm not a big fan of violence ever, really, I'm definitely not as much of a pacifist as Doss was. And I think that what's most valuable to me about this movie is how it I guess it would compel me to just be really clear on what my beliefs are and make sure that I put those into action. Not that they're necessarily about nonviolence, but just whatever they are. That I stand up for them, and I stand up for them publicly, and I stand up for them not just in words, but in how I live and my actions and how I treat people. That's where I think the strength, for me, that's the strength of the movie and how it's affected me.
I think that the metaphor for standing for what you believe in as opposed to the literal standing for nonviolence is what got my attention the whole time. And at the end of the movie, I wasn't even thinking about the whole nonviolence. I was thinking about his courage and really all the proving wrong. Because with that courage, and it shows that courage that God gave him didn't just help him be nonviolent, it helped him prove others wrong, and helped him in a way that got people to like him again, I guess, because he was bullied and God didn't just help him, he helped the other people.
Right.
That's what it did, is his actions didn't just help himself, it helped other people understand him and
and understand maybe
where he's coming from.
Maybe correct some of their own bad behavior or their, the way they jumped to conclusions and really just refused to see what kind of value he might have or bring. Hopefully the people who saw how they were proven wrong, hopefully they took that to heart.
What's funny is this really ties back into what I talked about in the very beginning about the election day. That's something that takes integrity and a lot of standing up for your beliefs, to vote for what you believe in, not just because somebody says, oh, I don't like them, or that's not the right choice. Like, if you believe it, then that's the right choice. And I think this movie, that shows that this movie is relevant in every way possible.
Yeah.
So I think that's really why this movie was so moving and so important to our lives. There are so many applications that go on for hours on just why this movie was important. So I think that's going to be it for today. Okay, so we're going to wrap things up for this week. Thank you for listening to Story to Light with your host Isaac and my guest, my mom. I hope you have a great week. Our intro and outro are written by Sam Jensen, also known as Sevens. So big thanks to him for supplying us with excellent music for these podcast series.